A medieval castle does not wake with excitement or urgency. It wakes with the same quiet heaviness it has carried for centuries. Long before anyone rises, the stones hold the cold of the night, and the air rests still between the walls as if time itself hesitates before beginning another day. At the edge of dawn, the first movement is not human. It is the draft slipping through narrow arrow slits, drifting along corridors where no footsteps have yet disturbed the silence. The stones do not warm quickly. They simply accept the morning as they accepted countless mornings before it, without complaint, without interest, without hurry. In the great hall, the embers of last night have collapsed into a dull gray mound. Servants enter quietly, shoulders hunched against the lingering chill, and begin coaxing a fire back to life. There is nothing dramatic in their motions. They shovel ash, arrange wood, and lean close to encourage a faint glow. Minutes pass without any visible change. Only the small crackle of new flame breaks the silence, and even that seems reluctant, as though the fire understands the slow expectations of the castle. Outside, the courtyard remains empty. Horses shift in the dim stables, hooves tapping softly against wooden beams as the stable boys move with sleepy slowness through straw that has not yet been replaced. Even the animals seem resigned to the pace of the place. Life here rarely rushes. It unfolds like cold breath on winter air, barely visible but always present. The guard on the battlements steps into the morning light with the familiarity of a man repeating a routine he has followed for years. He does not scan the horizon with the eagerness of a soldier awaiting danger. Instead, he walks the wooden walkway at a steady, measured pace, his eyes drifting over the same landscape he has seen every day. The surrounding fields, the distant tree line, the quiet road leading toward the outer villages. Nothing changes quickly, and the guard does not expect it to. He knows the castle's greatest enemy is not an invading army, but the slow wearing of wind, rain, and time. Below him, the kitchens begin the day's work. There is no warmth yet. The hearth smolders and smokes as servants haul buckets of water from the well. The cook speaks softly, giving instructions in a tone that suggests both familiarity and resignation. Porridge thickens in the pot. Dough shaped the night before rests near the hearth where it softens just enough to bake. The kitchen is often imagined as a place of lively noise and appetizing smells, but in truth it is a cold cavern of slow rituals. People move with purpose, but never with haste. High above the courtyard, the lady of the castle wakes as a servant brings warm water. Rising from the bed takes time. The mattress sags unevenly, the curtains trap cool air, and each layer of clothing requires assistance. She sits by the window once dressed, her gaze moving across the same courtyard she has watched countless mornings. Nothing surprises her anymore. A tool left where it should not be, a hen wandering near the steps, a missing bucket. These are the small variations in a life defined by repetition. The lord of the castle begins his morning in much the same way, though perhaps with slightly more ceremony. Yet even he faces the same slow rhythm. Decisions about grain storage, repairs, tenant disputes, and supplies fill the morning hours. None of them carry excitement, but all of them matter in ways that battles never fully capture. The castle survives not through heroic moments, but through the continuous, unremarkable labor that stops it from collapsing into disrepair. Deep inside the keep, a young servant spins wool with slow, deliberate movements. Another kneels near a window mending torn clothing. Someone sweeps staircases that will gather dirt again before evening. These tasks rarely appear in tales of medieval castles, yet they define daily existence far more than feasts or battles ever did. Life in a castle is shaped by the quiet persistence of these small actions, repeated endlessly without recognition. To understand life in a medieval castle, one must remove the notion of drama. The wind through the stone halls is more common than shouts. The rustle of fabric in dim stairwells replaces the sound of clashing steel. The tap of a wooden bucket against a well's edge echoes more often than any trumpet. The rhythms are soft and understated. Days unfold without remarkable events, and nights settle without fanfare. The castle is a world where time stretches. Waiting becomes a companion. People wait for servants to return, for fires to warm rooms, for bread to rise, for letters to arrive, for seasons to shift. Even the Lord waits, though he hides it behind the duties of authority. The castle waits as well. It stands exactly as it stood the day before, and likely as it will stand tomorrow, indifferent to the people who move through it. Life here moves at the speed of stone, and no one truly expects it to move any faster. In the mid-morning hours, the castle settles into the kind of quiet that is not entirely silence, but rather a mixture of faint, familiar sounds layered so softly that none of them command attention. A wooden door creaks somewhere deep inside the keep, not loudly, merely acknowledging movement. Floorboards shift beneath the weight of someone passing along an upper corridor. The distant thud of a pestle grinding herbs in the small chamber near the kitchens pulses like a slow heartbeat. These sounds blend into the background, woven into the castle's walls as naturally as dust or drafts. They are not interruptions. They are the castle's way of existing. In the courtyard, a few servants gather to begin tasks that seem simple when viewed from afar, but consume countless hours. Repairing a loose hinge, moving sacks of grain from one storage room to another, sweeping the stone walkway though the wind will scatter leaves again by evening. Each action is performed with a calm steadiness that suggests no alternative pace has ever been considered. Medieval work rarely invites urgency unless something breaks dramatically, and dramatic breaks are fortunately rare. Most days pass without incident. Most hours blend together. A hinge repaired today might have been repaired the same way 10 years earlier. The grains being moved from storage to kitchen have been moved similarly for generations. The stables remain a place of slow order as well. Stable boys brush the horses with wide, rhythmic strokes, the kind repeated more from memory than thought. Hay is forked from one corner to another. Water buckets are checked, emptied, refilled. The horses react with the same unhurried temperament, ears flicking lazily, heads lowering as if the morning itself weighs gently upon them. The smell of hay, horses, and damp wood lingers in the air, but even this scent feels subdued, softened by the slow passage of time within the courtyard walls. By late morning, the great hall fills with muted activity. Servants carry wooden platters and simple cups, preparing the table for a midday meal that is practical rather than indulgent. Bread is placed without ceremony, a pot of stew brought in with care to avoid spilling, though its aroma remains modest. No grand feast, no lavish display, just sustenance. In a place where survival depends on the steady fulfillment of basic needs, the midday meal mirrors every other aspect of castle life. Functional, consistent, undisturbed by extravagance. The Lord enters the hall not as a triumphant figure, but as a man moving through the familiar motions expected of him. He listens to reports from his steward regarding tenant disputes, potential repairs to the outer wall, or the slow arrival of supplies from distant villages. These matters rarely come with urgency. They unfold gradually, like everything else. A problem identified today may take weeks to resolve. A message sent might take months to receive a reply. Patience is not merely a virtue in a medieval castle. It is a requirement, enforced by distance, weather, limited resources, and the slow machinery of communication. The lady of the castle might spend the late morning overseeing domestic matters. She walks through the storerooms, her steps soft on the stone floor, examining sacks of flour, jars of preserved fruits, bundles of herbs drying from wooden beams. She asks gentle questions about the state of linens, the availability of candles, the weaving of new cloth. Her presence is not commanding but quietly authoritative. Life in a castle depends on the smooth functioning of these domestic operations, but the work itself rarely appears impressive to outsiders. It is measured in small tasks accomplished one after another, in quiet checks and steady oversight. In one chamber, a servant kneels by a fireplace, sweeping away ashes from the previous night before stacking new logs for the evening. The fireplace will not be lit until dusk, yet preparing it now ensures that nothing must be rushed later. In another room, a young apprentice polishes metal clasps and buckles, rubbing with a cloth until the surface reflects a dull, muted shine. The apprentice's motions are repetitive, almost meditative, and the work does not aim for brilliance. It aims for usefulness, which in a medieval castle is often the most one can hope for. Outside the keep, the castle's small garden receives its share of attention. A gardener bends over patches of herbs or vegetables, pulling weeds slowly, sometimes pausing to straighten his back and look toward the sky. The castle looms behind him, its walls solid and unmoved. The seasons dictate his work more than the Lord does. In spring he plants. In summer he tends. In autumn he gathers what the earth offers. In winter he waits. Nature's pace aligns comfortably with castle life. Both move according to rhythms that resist haste. As midday fades into early afternoon, the castle grows quieter again. The sun warms the courtyard slightly, though never enough to remove its chill entirely. A few chickens scratch near the steps. A servant carries a bundle of firewood on her hip, her footsteps soft and unhurried. Somewhere from within the keep, the faint sound of a harp drifts through narrow hallways. Perhaps someone practices in a private chamber, not for entertainment but for routine, a quiet repetition of notes that fill time as much as they fill space. Afternoon duties continue with the same steady pace. The Lord may walk the battlements, inspecting the walls, not expecting trouble, but fulfilling a responsibility that has existed for generations. He pauses occasionally to look at the horizon, though nothing new ever appears there. The surrounding lands remain unchanged, the villages small and distant, the fields stretching outward with a calm that borders on monotony. Yet monotony is not unwelcome. In a world where uncertainty can bring hardship, predictability feels like a blessing. Inside the keep, the lady spends time with needlework, her fingers moving with practiced familiarity as she stitches patterns into cloth. The designs may represent family symbols, religious motifs, or simple repetition of shapes. The room is quiet except for the faint scratch of thread pulling through fabric. Her thoughts move slowly, drifting as gently as dust drifting through a beam of afternoon light. Outside, noise rarely reaches this chamber. Even when it does, it arrives softened, subdued by stone and distance. The castle chapel may see a visitor or two during the afternoon hours. Someone might kneel before the altar, whispering prayers too faint for anyone else to hear. The small space smells of wax and old wood, and the air feels thicker, as if the walls themselves hold the weight of countless whispered hopes. There is no grandeur in these prayers. They are simple, everyday pleas for health, safety, or a good harvest. Yet the stillness of the chapel lends them a quiet gravity. The hours drift. Afternoon becomes late afternoon with almost no noticeable shift. Shadows lengthen subtly. The sounds of work slow even further. A servant closes a heavy wooden door. A bucket is set down against stone. A horse releases a low, tired breath in the stables. Life continues without spectacle, as it always does. A medieval castle is not a place of sudden moments. It is a place of gradual ones, unfolding at a pace that mirrors the weight of the walls. This is the heart of life in a medieval castle, an endless repetition of small tasks, steady motions, and soft sounds that fill the days without ever demanding attention or applause. Nothing feels rushed. Nothing seems urgent. The world within the stone walls exists in a state of patient endurance, shaped by routines that have remained unchanged for generations. As the afternoon settles into its quiet rhythm, the light softens across the courtyard, casting long, pale shadows that stretch toward the walls. The castle seems to breathe a little more slowly during these hours, as though it has grown accustomed to the day and now moves through it with a calm inevitability. The warmth of the sun never quite penetrates the thickness of the stone, but it offers a fragile comfort to those who pass through the open spaces. Servants crossing the yard lift their faces briefly toward the light, not in joy or admiration, but simply out of habit, as if checking whether the sky still keeps its usual course. Inside the keep, the air cools steadily. A few servants carry wool blankets from storage rooms to chambers where evening drafts tend to settle first. Their footsteps echo faintly on staircases whose stones have been worn smooth by generations of the same motion. No one rushes. There is time for everything, and everything takes time. A blanket folded now will be unfolded hours later without any acknowledgement of effort. The work is not done for recognition. It is done so the castle can continue the silent, unchanging life expected of it. In some rooms, the low murmur of conversation drifts like a thin thread through the stillness. People speak quietly in castles, partly out of respect, partly out of practicality, and partly because loud voices struggle to survive in the dense, echoing architecture. Stone swallows sound in unpredictable ways, sending a whisper drifting farther than a shout. Servants know this, and so their conversations remain soft, brief, and composed mostly of small observations or requests. The castle does not encourage chatter. It encourages efficiency disguised as quiet. In a small chamber near the inner wall, a young boy grinds grain with slow, circular motions, turning the heavy stone with a steady rhythm. The sound is soft and repetitive, like a heartbeat muffled beneath layers of cloth. His hands move with the resigned diligence of someone who knows the task will not end quickly. The grain dust clings to his sleeves and hair, yet he continues without complaint. Generations before him performed the same task in the same room, and generations after him likely will too. The castle endures through this cycle of unremarkable repetition. As the sun lowers further, the steward walks through the outer corridors, taking note of small concerns. He observes a loose board in a walkway, a draft gathering near a window, the slow drip from a bucket left beneath a leak no one has gotten around to repairing. He does not express frustration or urgency. The castle has many such issues, and attending to them is a perpetual process. Repairs finished today may require attention again next season. In this place, maintenance is not a project, but a constant state of being. The servants preparing the evening meal work without the rush that might appear in modern kitchens. The pot of stew from midday simmers again, its aroma drifting gently through the lower halls. A loaf of bread, darker and firmer than a modern palate might expect, is sliced into uneven pieces. A few vegetables, softened by the slow cook of the pot, are added without ceremony. Nothing extravagant marks the evening meal. Food is a necessity, not an occasion. The cook tastes the broth with a wooden spoon, nods with mild approval, and returns to her work. This nod is not a sign of pride, merely confirmation that the food will sustain those who eat it, which is all a castle demands. In the great hall, servants place torches into iron sconces one by one. The flames flicker and cast long, wavering bands of light across the stone. The hall never feels entirely warm, even at the height of summer. Tonight it carries the same cool heaviness it always does. The torches push back only enough darkness to make movement possible. Beyond that, the shadows remain undisturbed. They creep along the walls, filling corners and archways with familiar shapes. The Lord enters with the same calm expression he wore during the midday meal. He sits at the long table, his posture relaxed but his thoughts drifting somewhere far from the hall. He listens to a few small reports from the day, none of them urgent. A stretch of fencing has fallen near the outer field. A villager has asked permission to gather wood from a nearby forest. The butcher's son is feverish, and there is mild concern about winter sickness spreading early. Nothing demands immediate action, but everything requires some degree of quiet attention. The Lord responds with small nods and simple decisions that ripple outward through the castle's routine. The lady enters shortly after, accompanied by a servant carrying a needlework frame. She sits near the fire, though the flames offer more light than warmth. Her garment catches the glow, shifting gently with each quiet movement of her hands as she continues her stitching. Her presence adds a soft elegance to the hall, though not the grand spectacle often imagined in stories. She, too, embodies the castle's rhythm, steady, patient, absorbed in the tasks that fill hours more than they fill narratives. A few guards eat their meal at a smaller table, speaking only when necessary. Their armor rests near the wall, and their tunics, worn from constant use, reveal the practical nature of their work. These men are not the shining knights of legend. They are working men, accustomed to long hours, cold nights, and uneventful days. Their duties might require vigilance, but real threats rarely arrive. Most of their time is spent watching, waiting, and walking the same paths until they know each stone by memory. Outside the hall, the castle chapel glows with the faint light of a few candles. A priest or monk may kneel inside, murmuring prayers in a voice almost indistinguishable from the natural echoes of the stone chamber. The chapel is not a place of loud devotion. It is a place of quiet endurance, a sanctuary for thoughts heavy enough to feel at home in the stillness. The faint scent of melted wax settles into the wooden benches, mixing with the dry smell of old parchment. As evening deepens, the castle draws inward. The corridors darken as torches are extinguished in rooms no longer needed. Footsteps grow fewer and softer. A lone servant carries a final bucket of water up a narrow staircase, the sound of sloshing liquid echoing faintly behind him. A window shutter creaks as someone adjusts it to block a cold draft. Somewhere in the keep, a door closes with a slow, heavy thud that reverberates like a distant drum. The day does not end with any defining moment. It fades gradually, like a candle burning low. The castle becomes a collection of dim chambers, quiet corridors, and remote pockets of light where the last few people move before sleep. Even then, the pace remains unchanged. No one hurries to reach their bed. No one needs to. The castle will still be here tomorrow, unchanged, unmoved, and waiting for its routines to begin again. As night settles over the castle, the remaining traces of daylight withdraw from the courtyard, leaving only the pale shimmer of moonlight to outline the edges of walls and rooftops. The air grows colder, and the stones release none of the warmth they absorbed earlier. They simply hold the chill as naturally as lungs hold breath, and this chill seeps into every room and corridor. Torches continue to flicker along the main passageways, but their light stretches only so far before dissolving into deep, unmoving shadow. Servants finish their final tasks of the evening, moving with an exhaustion that is neither dramatic nor heavy, merely expected. A young girl carries folded linens to the upper chambers, the fabric pressed against her chest as she climbs the spiral stairs step by step. Another servant empties a basin of water into a trench near the wall, watching the ripples settle before turning back toward the keep. The rhythm of these actions resembles the closing ritual of a day performed countless times before. It is not done for efficiency or beauty. It is done because it has always been done this way. In the great hall, the once lively glow of torches has dimmed. Only a few remain lit, their flames swaying gently as though ready to rest. The lord and lady have retired to their chambers. A steward reviews a small cluster of wooden tablets near the fire, though his attention is loose, and his eyelids grow heavier with each passing moment. He eventually rises, stretches with a restrained sigh, and leaves the hall in silence. His footsteps fade quickly into the echoing corridors, swallowed by stone. The guards take their positions for the night. Their patrols are slow, deliberate, and predictable. A guard walks along the parapet, feeling the cold seep through his boots and up his legs as he paces the familiar path between the watchtower and the corner turret. He pauses occasionally to scan the darkness beyond the walls, though he expects to find nothing. Most nights bring nothing. The guard knows this well. His duty is not shaped by the anticipation of danger, but by the acceptance of possibility. And so he walks, not with vigilance sharpened by fear, but with endurance sharpened by repetition. Inside the keep, the private chambers settle into quiet. In the Lord's chamber, the heavy drapery muffles the faint currents of cold air that slip through window cracks. The fire burns low, offering only a whisper of warmth that rises in slow waves. The Lord sleeps lightly, accustomed to the distant sounds of the castle that persist through the night. The creak of beams adjusting to temperature changes, the weak thump of wind against shutters, the distant murmur of a guard shifting his weight. These sounds are not disturbances. They are part of the castle's breath, the familiar chorus that accompanies every night. In the ladies' chamber, a single candle remains burning on a small wooden table. It flickers gently, casting long, soft shadows over tapestries that hang motionless on the walls. She lies awake for some time, listening to the quiet. The castle has a way of amplifying silence, turning it into something nearly tangible. She watches the last inch of candle melt slowly into a pool of wax before her eyes grow heavy and she finally drifts into sleep. Elsewhere in the keep, servants sleep in shared rooms where the cold gathers in the corners. They curl beneath worn blankets, their bodies huddled close to conserve warmth. Their day begins before dawn, so their sleep arrives quickly and without ceremony. A faint cough echoes in the dark chamber. Someone shifts on a straw mattress. Then all becomes still again. The castle kitchen is a cavern of shadows now. Earlier warmth has vanished from the hearth, leaving only a faint red glow buried beneath ash. Pots hang motionless from iron hooks. The lingering scents of the day's meals have faded, replaced by the dry smell of extinguished firewood. A mouse scurries briefly across the floor before disappearing into a small gap near the wall. Its tiny sounds go unnoticed. Castles are full of such small visitors, and their presence is woven into the unspoken rhythms of the night. The chapel stands as one of the quietest places in the entire keep. Moonlight filters faintly through narrow windows, painting soft lines on the stone floor. The wooden benches sit in perfect stillness, their surfaces worn smooth by years of hands resting upon them. The altar cloth stirs slightly in the draught, shifting just enough to remind anyone watching, though no one is watching, that the castle is never truly motionless. Even the air has a way of moving here, softly and without intention. In a small chamber near the outer wall, a lone servant sits awake longer than the others. He tends a small lantern, repairing its hinge with slow, precise motions. The lantern must be ready for the guard's patrol tomorrow, and he prefers to finish his work before sleep. His hands move with the calm patience of someone who understands that the task is not urgent but still necessary. When he is done, he places the lantern gently on a wooden shelf and stretches his fingers. Then he extinguishes the candle and lies down on his straw mattress, closing his eyes without expecting rest to come quickly. Nights are long in the castle, and sleep often arrives gradually. The deeper the night grows, the more the castle feels like a living creature in a slow and ancient slumber. The thick walls hold their silence in steady layers. The roof beams groan softly as the temperature drops. The wind snakes through narrow passages, creating quiet tones that rise and fall like distant sighs. These sounds do not disturb anyone familiar with them. They are as much a part of the castle as the stones themselves. Beyond the walls, the land lies still beneath the widening moonlight. The fields appear silver in the darkness, and the treetops sway gently in the breeze. From the high towers, the world seems unchanged, as if frozen in a timeless moment. The roads leading away from the castle vanish into the blackness, quiet and deserted. No travelers approach at this hour. No carts, no animals, no flame-bearing riders. Night belongs to stillness. Inside, the castle absorbs the quiet, holding it carefully as though safeguarding a secret. Nothing dramatic happens in these hours. Nothing unusual breaks the monotony. This is the reality of medieval life. Long stretches of quiet existence, shaped more by endurance than by action. The castle accepts the night just as it accepted the day, with the same slow patience that defines its very nature. The castle moves deeper into the night with the steady, unhurried rhythm of a place that has lived far longer than any person sleeping within its walls. Hours pass quietly, marked not by activity, but by the subtle shifting of sounds. A guard on the north wall clears his throat, the sound drifting into the cold air before fading. A shutter taps lightly against its frame as a breeze brushes past. Somewhere in the depths of the keep, a rope holding a bucket in place creaks as it settles under its own weight. These faint noises do not disturb the stillness, they define it. They are the castle's language, spoken softly in the absence of motion. In the Lord's chamber, the fire has dwindled to weak embers. The faint glow provides just enough light to reveal the outlines of heavy furniture. A chest carved with geometric patterns, a chair near the hearth, a bed whose curtains fall like silent shadows. The Lord shifts slightly in his sleep, responding not to any sound but to the cold that gathers near the edges of the room. The stone walls radiate their chill without mercy. Even under layers of wool, the body feels it. Medieval people learn to sleep through discomfort not because they grow used to it, but because they have no other choice. The lady's chamber is similarly cool. Her candle burned out hours ago, leaving only the soft silver of moonlight filtering through the high window. It casts pale shapes across the floor, touching the edges of a tapestry that hangs near her bed. The cloth depicts a hunting scene. Though in the dim light the figures appear indistinct, their forms softened into simple silhouettes. She sleeps with one hand beneath her cheek, breathing slowly, her dreams shaped not by adventure or fear, but by the steady monotony of castle life. Even in sleep, the rhythm of the day carries forward, unbroken. In the servants' quarters, bodies lie close together beneath coarse blankets. The air is dense with the warmth of shared breathing, the soft rustle of straw mattresses shifting. A child whimpers briefly in sleep, then settles again. A woman turns onto her side, sighing as her shoulder presses against the hard wall. These people rise early, so their sleep is deep, though never truly comfortable. Yet the familiarity of the space offers a kind of security. They know every corner of this room, every draft, every sound the building makes as it contracts in the cold. Their world is small, but it is known. Down in the kitchen, shadows stretch across the large work table. The pots hanging from the ceiling sway slightly in the breeze that slips in through a crack near the chimney. The hearth glows faintly, holding onto the last of its heat like an old memory. The soft drip of water echoes from a bucket in the corner. No one moves here, but the room retains a lingering echo of the day's activity, as though the air itself remembers the clatter of bowls and the murmur of voices. It will all begin again in just a few hours. A guard walks through the inner courtyard, his torch casting shaky pools of yellow light along the stone path. He pauses near the well, listening to the distant creaking of the windmill outside the castle walls. The sound reaches him as a low, rhythmic groan carried by the night air. He knows the mill is far from the castle, yet on windy nights it seems to draw closer, its wooden spine complaining softly against the pull of the breeze. The guard waits a moment longer, then continues on his route, his boots tapping gently in the cold. In the small chamber beside the gatehouse, two guards sit at a wooden table, sharing the last of the day's bread. Their conversation is minimal, consisting mostly of short exchanges about the weather, the condition of the nearby road, or the faint howl of wolves in the distant forest. Their voices remain low, as though even speech should not disrupt the castle's slumber. They know that little will happen during their watch, and they do not expect the night to offer anything unusual. Still, they remain awake, more out of duty than vigilance. The animals in the stables shift restlessly from time to time. A horse stamps its hoof against the wooden floor. A goat rustles in its pen. The animals sense the cold more keenly than the humans do, and the stables offer only partial shelter from the wind. But they are used to these conditions. A stable boy sleeping nearby hears the faint noises, but does not rise. He has tended these animals for too many seasons to be disturbed by ordinary sounds. Outside the walls, the landscape rests beneath a vast, indifferent sky. The moon remains bright, illuminating patches of the forest where branches sway lazily. A thin frost begins to form over the grass, sharpening the edges of each blade. A fox slips silently through the underbrush, its movements careful, its ears attuned to the distant hum of the castle. Yet even the fox knows there is nothing interesting here tonight. The stones offer no food, no warmth, no opportunity, only endurance. In the chapel, the last candle flickers weakly. Its flame trembles as though unsure whether to survive a moment longer. Eventually, it yields, sinking into a thin ribbon of smoke that curls upward and vanishes into the dimness. The chapel darkens completely. The faint sound of the wind pressing against the narrow windows remains. Yet there is an added stillness now, a kind of solemnity that belongs only to spaces dedicated to quiet devotion. The benches rest without movement. The altar cloth lies smooth and undisturbed. The silence feels ancient and unbroken. Throughout the castle, the night deepens, but it does not intensify. There is no crescendo, no sudden shift. The hours pass in their usual, unremarkable way, defined by the predictable settling of wood, the echo of distant footsteps, the muffled snore of a sleeping servant. Medieval nights have no artificial brightness to banish the darkness, no sudden noise to break the stillness. The world reduces itself to essentials: breath, stone, cold, and time. Eventually, a faint hint of gray appears beyond the eastern wall. Dawn is still far off, but the promise of it lingers. The castle does not respond yet. It remains in its heavy slumber, holding on to the quiet that wraps around it like a thick cloak. But the world outside has begun its slow transformation toward morning. The guards know this pattern well. They feel the night loosening its hold. Gradually, the earliest moments of dawn begin to take shape beyond the castle walls, though no light has yet reached the courtyard. The world outside shifts almost imperceptibly. The thick darkness thins into a softer shade, the kind that suggests morning without offering it. The guards on the battlements notice this change not by sight, but by the way the air behaves. It loses a fraction of its weight, just enough to hint that the long night is unraveling. They continue their patrols without comment. Dawn will come whether they acknowledge it or not. Inside the keep, the deepest chambers remain completely dark. The air is still and heavy, untouched by any movement. The lingering smell of last night's fire rests against the walls. In one of the lower rooms, a pile of stored firewood shifts slightly as it settles, releasing a faint, dry crackle that disappears as quickly as it arrived. No one hears it. The castle responds to time not through dramatic gestures, but through small adjustments that resemble the quiet turning of a massive, invisible wheel. In the servants' quarters, bodies gradually stir beneath their blankets. The earliest risers awaken before full awareness reaches them. They lie still for a few moments, listening to the silence, their breathing syncing with the slow rhythm of the room. The cold presses against their bodies, urging them to rise even as it discourages movement. One servant rubs her eyes, another stretches stiff legs beneath the blanket, and slowly the room begins to shift from sleep to waking. There is no spoken signal. The castle dictates the schedule through its unchanging demands. A single candle is lit. Its flame flickers weakly, struggling against the draft. The sudden presence of even this small light reveals the rough texture of the stone walls and the patchwork blankets that cover the straw beds. The servants begin dressing in layers of coarse fabric, their fingers fumbling with chilled laces and ties. These first moments of the day belong entirely to transition, to the slow acceptance that another cycle of tasks has begun. In the kitchen, the fire from last night is almost entirely dead. A few red stains of heat cling to the ash like fading memories. The cook enters with a wool shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders. Her breath clouds in front of her face as she kneels to coax the embers back to life. She works with measured, unhurried motions, arranging kindling in practiced layers. The fire hesitates at first, reluctant to surrender to the day, but gradually it responds. A faint crackle, a thread of orange light, a deepening glow. The cook nods in quiet approval. Another day begins exactly as every other day has begun. In the courtyard, a guard pauses mid-step and looks upward. The sky still appears dark, but the edges have softened into a distant gray. He listens to the wind, or perhaps to the absence of wind, and continues walking. A stable boy emerges from a side door, rubbing his arms briskly. His boots scrape lightly against the stones as he crosses toward the stables. He opens the door with a gentle push, careful not to startle the animals inside. The horses greet him with slow movements, their breath rising in thin clouds as he moves from stall to stall, checking water, smoothing hay, whispering words that blend easily into the quiet. Not far away, a maid enters the well chamber with a wooden bucket. The rope groans softly as she lowers it into the cold darkness below. The splash echoes faintly, amplified by the stone walls. The maid waits, leaning slightly against the edge, her face pale in the early gray light. When she pulls the bucket back up, droplets fall in a neat pattern onto the floor, creating a small, temporary constellation of darkened spots. She lifts the bucket carefully and walks back toward the keep, her steps steady and unhurried. The Lord's chamber receives the first weak hint of morning. A thin line of silver light crawls across the floorboards as the sky shifts from deep blue to a faint, diluted gray. The Lord wakes slowly, not startled, not eager, simply rising because the day requires it. He sits at the edge of the bed, wrapped in a woolen blanket, and listens. He hears nothing unusual. The absence of unusual noise is reassuring. A quiet night is a good night in a castle. In her chamber, the lady wakes in much the same way. She pulls the covers close around her as a servant enters with warm water in a small basin. The servant moves softly, placing the basin on a wooden stand before stepping back. The lady dips her hands into the water, feeling the brief, welcome contrast against the cold air. Her thoughts drift through the tasks ahead, though none of them carry urgency. They are the same tasks she faced yesterday and will likely face again tomorrow. A faint bell rings near the chapel. It sounds soft and deliberate. It does not call people with authority, but simply acknowledges the passage of time. A monk lights a candle on the small altar and begins his morning prayers. His voice is low, shaped by years of restraint, never rising above the hum of the flame. The chapel fills with a dim, warm glow that fights gently against the gray dawn outside. By now the courtyard has taken on the muted colors of early morning. The stones glisten slightly with dew. A pair of chickens wander lazily near the entrance of a storage shed, pecking at the ground with aimless curiosity. The gates remain closed, but the world beyond them begins its own slow stirrings as villagers prepare for another day of work in the fields. Inside the keep, the waking routine spreads from room to room. Servants carry linens to be aired. A young boy sweeps a hallway with a broom nearly as tall as he is, the bristles dragging softly against the stone. A woman climbs the stairs to open the shutters in a chamber that receives the morning sun, letting in a faint trickle of pale light. These actions barely register as events. They are part of the castle's living memory, repeated so often they have become indistinguishable from the structure itself. As the light strengthens, the castle's form becomes more defined. The shadows retreat, though not entirely. The corners of corridors and the edges of stairwells remain wrapped in deeper darkness, holding onto the night longer than the rest of the keep. The stones themselves seem to shift color, moving from the cool blue of early dawn into a muted gray that reflects the day's potential without revealing anything more. Nothing dramatic announces the beginning of this new day. There is no moment of transformation, no sudden burst of activity. The castle simply transitions from one state of quiet existence to another. Day replaces night as naturally as breath replaces stillness, and everyone within the walls accepts this shift with the same calm resignation that shapes every hour of their lives. As morning fully settles over the castle, the light grows steadier, though it never becomes bright in the way it might in open fields or bustling towns. Here, the sun must negotiate with thick stone walls and narrow windows, entering the keep in thin, muted bands that stretch across the floors like pale ribbons. These beams do not warm the room so much as reveal its contours, catching faint dust motes drifting slowly in the air, each speck moving with the languid patience that defines the castle itself. The great hall awakens next, not with noise, but with a gradual increase in activity. Servants walk across the floor with the soft, deliberate steps of people who know exactly how sound behaves in large spaces. A fire has begun to take hold in the hearth, its crackling restrained and subdued. The warmth spreads slowly, hugging the edges of the stone rather than filling the room. Wooden tables are wiped down with damp cloths, the moisture leaving darker streaks that disappear once the cloth passes again. Bench legs scrape faintly against the floor. These sounds form a quiet tapestry of movement, signaling the start of another day without announcing it boldly. The steward arrives with a bundle of wooden tablets tucked under his arm. He sets them down on a small side table and begins sorting them, his lined face bent close to the etched markings that denote rents, inventories, and minor disputes. His movements carry no rush. Each mark is reviewed, not because any of them contain surprises, but because reviewing them is what the day requires. The business of the castle rarely involves urgency. It involves persistence, a slow but steady engagement with matters that never fully resolve but must always be tended. In the courtyard, the stable boy leads a horse outside for brushing. The horse's breath emerges in steady clouds of white, and the boy's hands move through the animal's coat in long, repetitive strokes. Tufts of loose hair drift to the ground. The horse shifts its weight once or twice, not impatiently, but in the natural rhythm of an animal accustomed to early mornings and cool air. Nearby, a second boy carries a bucket of feed, his steps careful as he tries not to spill any of the precious contents. The sound of grain shifting inside the bucket makes a soft, steady whisper against the wooden sides. Close to the well, two women begin washing linens that were collected from the upper chambers. The well water is cold, and their hands redden as they scrub against rough cloth, yet their movements remain even and practiced. They speak little. Their work allows for thought, but not distraction. The sound of water splashing and cloth wringing creates a gentle backdrop to their silence, echoing faintly off the stone around them. Inside the keep, the lady of the castle sits near an open window, where the air carries the chill of the morning along with the faint scent of burning wood from the kitchen fires below. She reads from a small manuscript, her eyes moving steadily across the page. Books are rare, and each one is treasured. Her reading is not hurried. nor is it performed with the excitement of discovery. It is a familiar ritual, a way to pass time with quiet dignity. Every now and then she lifts her gaze to the courtyard before returning to the text, not because anything remarkable has happened, but because looking out is as much part of the routine as reading. The Lord meets with the steward shortly after. They discuss matters that repeat themselves year after year. A tenant with a damaged plow, a section of fencing needing repair, a request from a distant cousin seeking shelter for a few days, the estimated yield of the lower fields. None of these problems demand dramatic responses. The Lord listens, nods occasionally, and offers decisions shaped less by urgency than by practicality. The steward records each answer on his tablets, the scratching of his stylus barely audible above the steady crackle of the hearth. By midday, the castle has settled into a gentle hum. People move in predictable patterns between predictable places. A servant carries a basket of dried herbs from one chamber to another. A boy sweeps fallen leaves from the walkway near the tower stairs. A maid dusts a carved wooden chest, her motions slow and circular. These actions fill the hours, but they do not change the essence of the castle. They are its lifeblood, but they are not its story. The story remains the slow endurance of stone and the people who live within it. The midday meal arrives without fanfare. Bowls of stew are placed on the table, along with bread that has cooled into a firm crust. The Lord and Lady eat quietly, exchanging only brief, polite remarks. Servants wait along the wall, ready to refill cups or fetch additional bread. The hall feels neither lively nor solemn, simply steady. Once the meal ends, the dishes are cleared, leaving behind only the subtle scent of herbs and broth. Afterward, the lady returns to her embroidery, sitting near the same window that framed her morning reading. Her needlework forms small patterns across the cloth, the thread pulling smoothly through linen with each careful stitch. It is slow work, but it fills the hours with purpose. The Lord walks through the courtyard with the steward, discussing small repairs and the allocation of tasks for the next few days. Their conversation, though necessary, carries no particular weight. It is the kind of discussion that echoes through the years, repeating itself in new forms, but always with the same tone. As the afternoon unfolds, the castle once again enters its familiar rhythm of quiet labor. A carpenter sands a piece of wood for a replacement beam. A servant arranges dried herbs on the shelves of a small storage room. In the far corner of the courtyard, a boy practices archery with a bow that is slightly too large for him. His arrows land inconsistently along the lower part of the target, but he retrieves them without frustration, knowing he will repeat the same practice tomorrow and the next day. The hours pass not with urgency, but with the slow certainty of a place that knows nothing will change quickly. The castle stands as it always has, absorbing the movements of those who live within it, shaping their days into steady patterns defined more by repetition than by event. There is no rush, no sense of anticipation, no drama. Only the quiet unfolding of time, held gently between the stones. Through the early afternoon, the castle settles into the same deep steadiness it carries most days of the year. The sun, though not strong, reaches a point where it filters down into the courtyard at a slight angle, lighting the stones unevenly. It creates pockets of brightness that look almost accidental, falling on a patch of wall here, a wooden bucket there, a corner of the stable door left slightly ajar. No one pays much attention to this shifting light. It changes too slowly and too predictably to attract interest. People pass through it without noticing that the color of the courtyard has softened from gray to a muted, dusty gold. Inside the keep, the air grows slightly warmer, though only by a small margin. Most of the heat comes from the kitchens and travels upward in meandering paths, never reaching the upper rooms in any generous amount. Still, even a small increase in warmth eases the stiffness in cold fingers. A servant ironing garments over a heated stone pauses briefly, feeling the faint change in temperature against her skin, then resumes her work as though the moment never existed. In the castle, comfort comes in increments too minor to celebrate. In a chamber near the center of the keep, two women sort through a chest of fabrics. They lift each cloth piece carefully, inspecting it for wear or damage. The fabrics range from coarse, everyday linen to slightly finer wool reserved for cooler evenings. They do not speak much, only exchanging short, quiet comments when they find a tear that needs mending or a stain that must be washed out. Their movements resemble a slow conversation between hands and cloth, one that has been repeated countless times through the seasons. The room smells faintly of lavender placed in small bags among the garments to keep away insects. It is a soft, clean scent that settles into the corners of the chamber without trying to dominate the air. Outside, the noise of a hammer tapping against wood echoes briefly across the courtyard. The carpenter works at a small bench near the stable wall, shaping a replacement slat for a trough. His strikes are measured, producing a steady rhythm that blends into the soundscape rather than interrupting it. When he pauses to adjust his grip or examine the wood, the sudden absence of tapping feels almost louder than the tapping itself. He resumes with the same calm tempo, knowing there is no rush to finish. The castle does not hurry its repairs because the castle does not hurry anything at all. A pair of children, likely the offspring of servants, wander along the edges of the courtyard under the loose supervision of an older maid. They do not laugh loudly or run wildly. Even in youth, the gravity of stone shapes behavior. They speak quietly as they roll a small carved wooden horse back and forth. The toy clatters faintly against the stones, its wheels uneven from use. Their world is small but safe, bounded by towering walls that give the illusion of permanence. The maid sits nearby on a low stool, mending a simple cloak with slow, practiced motions of her needle. She glances at the children now and then, though more out of habit than concern. In the solar, a room typically used for quieter activities, the lady sits with a few companions engaged in gentle conversation. Their voices remain low, not out of secrecy, but because castles do not encourage loudness. The walls distort sound in ways that make loud conversation uncomfortable. The women discuss the weather, the progress of winter stores, and a letter received weeks ago from a distant relative. Their words drift through the air like threads, thin and soft, barely shaping the stillness of the room. Now and then one of them pauses to adjust her embroidery hoop, tightening the fabric with careful fingers before resuming her stitch work. The Lord spends part of the afternoon reviewing maps of the surrounding lands. These maps are drawn on rough parchment, their lines faded in places from years of handling. He studies them not out of curiosity, but out of responsibility. The fields, forests, and roads depicted on the maps determine the castle's stability. Borders shift slowly, if they shift at all. The Lord's task is simply to remain aware of what lies under his protection. He traces the line of a river with his finger, not imagining plans for expansion or conquest, but ensuring that nothing has changed that might require attention. As the hours continue, the shadows inside the keep begin to lengthen again, though almost imperceptibly at first. The castle transitions quietly, as it always does, from the muted stillness of afternoon toward the deeper, more reflective quiet of evening. People continue their duties with the same measured pace. A maid dusts the frames of narrow windows, lifting the cloth gently along the carved edges. A boy carries a tray of cups to the great hall, each step slow and balanced to avoid any rattling. The monk in the chapel tends to a pair of candles, trimming the wicks with small shears to keep the flame steady during the evening prayer. The scent of simmering broth drifts upward from the kitchens again. The changes in scent do more to mark the passage of time than the movement of the sun. Stew thickens. Bread darkens in the oven. Herbs steep in a small pot. These smells gather in the corridors near the lower floors before dispersing softly through the castle. They do not announce the coming meal, but they prepare the senses for it. Meanwhile, the carpenter finishes his work outside, setting the newly shaped piece of wood aside to cool. The stable boys begin bringing the horses back indoors, guiding them gently into their stalls. The animals move with an instinctive understanding of routine. The rustling of hay, the thud of hooves against wooden floors, the soft snorts of tired horses fill the stable with a warm, earthy rhythm. The afternoon does not end abruptly. It dissolves like a slow exhale, blending into evening without calling attention to itself. The sky outside shifts from gray to a faint amber hue, though only a sliver of this color reaches the courtyard. The rest is held outside by walls too thick to allow much light to slip through. The castle's existence continues in its familiar cycle, shaped by habit rather than change, and by repetition rather than event. As the afternoon leans gently toward evening, the castle settles into a deeper quiet, a kind of thoughtful stillness that feels older than anyone living within its walls. The air cools again, though not abruptly. It is a gradual shift, a slow reclaiming of the day by the approaching night. The stones beneath foot begin to hold the chill, storing it layer by layer, preparing to release it through the coming hours like a long, slow sigh. Nothing in the castle changes quickly, and even temperature follows this rule, fading from one state to the next with deliberate calm. Servants begin finishing the tasks they started earlier. A woman carrying a basket of herbs returns it to the storage chamber, arranging the bundles with meticulous care. The herbs hang from small wooden beams, their leaves drying in the dim air. The room smells faintly of thyme and mint, the scent lingering gently without ever becoming strong. She pauses to straighten a cloth on one of the shelves before leaving, her footsteps soft against the stone. A young boy sweeping the courtyard continues his task with the unhurried rhythm of someone accustomed to the monotony of such duties. His broom pushes fallen leaves into small piles that the wind immediately tries to scatter again. He watches the breeze undo his work with a resigned patience, then resumes sweeping, knowing the task is not meant to be finished, only performed. The leaves will return tomorrow and the day after, just as he will return with the same broom. Inside the keep, a maid dusts the carved edges of a long wooden bench. The carvings depict vines and small animals, though much of the detail has softened over the years. Her cloth moves gently along the patterns, lifting a thin layer of dust that floats momentarily before settling again elsewhere. Dust in a medieval castle never truly disappears. It simply drifts from one surface to another, sharing in the slow migration of air through the rooms. The maid knows this, but she continues anyway, because cleaning is about ritual, not finality. In the solar, the lady continues her embroidery, while her companions speak softly about minor matters. One mentions a recent visit from a distant relative. Another describes a dream she barely remembers. Their voices rise and fall in even tones, never disturbing the calm of the room. The tapestry growing beneath the lady's needle slowly takes shape, though it may take months to finish. Medieval embroidery is an exercise in patience as much as craft. She does not hurry. The castle teaches everyone to measure time differently. The lord and the steward finish their review of the estate and part ways with quiet nods. The lord walks the length of the upper corridor, pausing once to look through a narrow arched window that opens toward the west. The fading light paints the distant hills in muted colors. He watches without expectation, not seeking beauty or meaning, but simply acknowledging the landscape that governs so many of his responsibilities. The fields lie still, the river glimmers faintly, and the woods at the horizon shift only slightly in the wind. Nothing demands his attention at this moment, and he accepts that with relief. As the day's work winds down, the kitchen becomes the center of gentle activity again. Servants move around the large hearth, adding logs to the fire, stirring the pot of stew that has been simmering since midday, and preparing the evening bread. The smells deepen slightly, offering hints of thyme, onions, and roasted grain. The cook tastes the broth with the same wooden spoon she uses every day, nodding once before handing out quiet instructions. The kitchen is never hurried, never loud. It is a subdued choreography of familiar motions, shaped by countless repetitions over the years. In the courtyard, the stable boys make their final rounds. They check the horses, ensuring each has water and a comfortable layer of straw. One boy hums a faint tune under his breath, a sound so soft it disappears into the stillness before traveling more than a few feet. The horses shift with low murmurs, settling into their stalls as night approaches. Their movements have a calming effect on the space, adding to the sense of routine that blankets the castle. Near the northern wall, a guard stands leaning on his spear, not out of laziness but out of practicality. Long hours of standing require efficiency of posture. He watches the sky darken inch by inch, the subtle colors fading into deeper blues and then into early shades of gray. The castle walls loom around him, offering both security and confinement. He has walked these battlements countless times, and every stone along his path is familiar enough to be recognized by touch alone. A monk leaves the chapel, pulling his cloak close against the chill. He extinguishes the remaining candles before stepping quietly into the corridor. The faint smell of wax follows him for a few steps before fading. His sandals make almost no sound against the flagstones, and his figure blends into the dimness with ease. The chapel door swings shut behind him, its wooden surface absorbing the echoes like a sponge. The children in the courtyard are ushered indoors by the older maid. Their play ends without complaint. They pick up their wooden horse and follow her into the keep, their heads bowed slightly against the cold. Their day has been simple, contained entirely within these walls. Yet even in childhood they understand the rhythm of the castle, when to play, when to work, when to move quietly. The castle's transition from afternoon to evening is not marked by any single event. It is a gradual fading, a slow unwinding of the day's sparse energy. Shadows lengthen across the courtyard and then merge into one another. Torches are lit along the main corridors, their flames trembling gently as they begin their nightly duty. The light they offer is warm but fragile, revealing only parts of the rooms while leaving others in comforting darkness. By the time the sun disappears completely, The castle has returned to its natural state of deep quiet. People finish the last of their duties and move indoors. Tools are placed aside. Doors are closed. Voices fall to a whisper or disappear altogether. Evening does not descend. It settles, and the castle receives it with the same steady patience that defines every hour of its existence. As evening deepens, the castle absorbs the dimness with the familiarity of a place that has lived through countless nights exactly like this one. The sky outside darkens slowly, and the walls take on a deeper shade of gray, as though they are settling into a more natural color. Torches flicker along the main passages, casting wavering light that stretches and contracts across the stones with every shift of the flame. Their glow is never steady, never bright enough to dispel the surrounding darkness. Instead, it carves out small pockets of visibility, leaving the rest of the corridor wrapped in shadow. The great hall grows quiet after the evening meal. The long table stands mostly empty now, save for the lingering scent of broth and bread. A servant clears the remaining cups with slow, deliberate motions, stacking them carefully to avoid noise. The fire in the hearth burns low, its flames bending inward as if preparing to rest. Occasionally a log cracks, releasing a soft spark that rises briefly before fading into nothing. The hall does not echo with voices or footsteps. It simply rests in the low hum of the fire and the faint rustle of cloth against stone. Upstairs, the lady sits at her writing desk for a brief moment before retiring. The desk holds a small candle, its flame steady but subdued, illuminating an unfinished letter. She reads over the lines already written, though not with any urgency to complete them. Letters take days or weeks to reach their destinations, and replies take longer still. Time in the castle stretches, never demanding quick resolution. She closes the letter with gentle hands, sets her quill aside, and watches the candle flicker before rising from the chair. The room shifts slightly as she moves, the shadows responding to her presence as though reluctantly letting her go. The Lord stands by one of the narrow windows in his chamber, gazing into the quiet courtyard below. From his vantage point, he can see the faint glow of torches reflecting off the stone, the muted shapes of people finishing their final tasks, and the slow descent of night over the walls. He does not expect anything unusual. No message from distant lands, no travelers seeking shelter, no urgent calls from the village. The castle is steady, predictable, wrapped in a kind of inertia that suits him well. After a few minutes, he turns away from the window and prepares for sleep in a manner that mirrors the previous night and the nights before that. Down in the kitchen, the last of the coals are stirred to ensure they will be ready for morning. The cook covers a small bowl of herbs with cloth and places it near the hearth where it will dry slowly overnight. The smells of the day linger: cooked grains, dried lavender, the faint aroma of smoke, but they merge into the background as the fire dies down. A final pot is carried to the washroom, and the room falls still. The silence is complete enough that even the soft sound of soot settling along the chimney becomes noticeable for a moment before fading again. In the chapel, the remaining light from the window has disappeared entirely, leaving the space illuminated only by the faint glow of a single candle near the altar. The monk kneels in the dimness, his posture steady, his head bowed. His prayer is silent, shaped not by words, but by the slow cadence of breath. The chapel seems to hold its own breath with him, absorbing the stillness until both man and room appear carved from the same quiet. When he rises, He snuffs out the candle with practiced ease and leaves the room in complete darkness. Along the outer wall, guards make their slow rounds. Their footsteps form small echoes that ripple across the walkway before sinking into the night. The air is colder here, and the guards adjust their cloaks against the wind that drifts over the battlements. They peer into the distance, not expecting movement, but fulfilling their obligation to look. The fields below lie silent, untouched by any sign of life. The forests remain dark and inscrutable. Even the torches seem hesitant, their light swallowed quickly by the vast openness beyond the castle. In the lower chambers, the servants settle into their assigned sleeping spaces. They speak quietly for a few moments, exchanging brief remarks about the tasks of the day or the weather expected tomorrow. Their voices remain controlled, shaped by the understanding that stone walls carry sound farther than intended. Gradually, their conversations taper off, replaced by the soft rustle of blankets and the faint sighs of weary bodies sinking onto straw. Sleep does not come immediately, but the slow rhythm of the castle helps draw them toward it. The animals in the stables shift and settle. A horse gives a gentle snort before lowering its head into the hay. A goat curls into itself, searching instinctively for warmth in the cool air. A rooster perched above watches the dim torchlight flicker from outside but remains quiet, knowing by instinct that morning is still far away. The stable boys, sleeping nearby, pull their blankets tighter as the cold deepens. The castle's many rooms and corridors descend into silence, each one surrendering to the weight of the night. Only the outer wind continues its slow movement, slipping between stones and touching the torches with soft gusts that make the flames bow. The structure itself seems to exhale, a long and steady release as the day comes to an end. Nothing interrupts this moment. No urgent calls, no distant horns, no flicker of unexpected movement. Just the steady settlement of stone into darkness. Little by little, the castle becomes a place of pure stillness, holding its occupants within a world defined not by action, but by endurance. It waits, as it has waited for countless nights, for morning to begin the same cycle once more. A cycle of slow tasks, muted voices, predictable motions, and the steady passage of time marked only by the shift of shadow and light. As the night progresses toward its quietest hours, the castle reaches a level of stillness that feels almost suspended in time. The air grows colder, settling against the walls and seeping into every chamber, corridor, and stairwell. The darkness seems to thicken, not in a threatening way, but in a way that suggests the castle recognizes the weight of night and allows it to rest across its surfaces without resistance. The few remaining torches burn low, their flames shrinking into elongated shapes that flicker as though struggling to remain awake. In the servants' quarters, sleep deepens. The breathing of those gathered in the small, crowded room becomes synchronized, a soft ebb and flow like the tide of some distant, unseen sea. A blanket shifts as someone rolls onto their side. Straw rustles faintly beneath the weight of a turning body. These sounds are momentary and vanish almost as soon as they appear. The darkness here is complete, so complete that even if someone opened their eyes, they would see nothing but a vague silhouette of the ceiling and the shadows of bodies nearby. In the great hall, the embers in the hearth glow faintly, casting a muted red halo that barely reaches the first few stones of the floor. Ash settles layer by layer, forming a delicate gray pattern that will be swept away by morning. The long table stands silent, its surfaces softened by the darkness. Benches sit empty, their legs still holding the memory of the day's wait. The hall is a gathering place only when people fill it. At night, it becomes a cavern of quiet, a hollow vessel that stores the day's echoes until dawn returns them to life. The lady sleeps in her chamber, her bed curtains pulled close to keep out the draft. The flickering candle she left earlier has completely burned down, leaving only a faint smell of wax lingering in the air. Her breathing is light, measured, untroubled. A tapestry on the wall stirs slightly in a hidden current of air, the fabric shifting with a sound so soft it seems more imagined than real. The embroidered images, figures on horseback, trees with carefully stitched leaves, fade into indistinguishable shapes in the darkness. The Lord rests in his own chamber, though not as deeply. Nights often bring him periods of wakefulness, short intervals where he lies still, listening to the quiet as though it might reveal something important. He hears the occasional creak of wood, the distant sigh of wind passing by a window, the faint murmur of a guard shifting position outside. These noises do not alarm him. They reassure him that the castle remains intact, functioning within its familiar patterns. After a few moments, he closes his eyes again, surrendering to sleep with the same acceptance he offers to every part of his daily routine. The guards on the battlements continue their rounds. Their silhouettes move slowly along the walkway, the torchlight behind them distorting their shapes into stretched, wavering figures. One guard pauses to peer into the distance. The fields are dark, the forest beyond nearly invisible. Only the strip of sky above provides a point of reference, its stars faint but steady. The guard exhales, watching his breath dissolve into the cold night air, then resumes walking. He does not expect danger, but vigilance is the rhythm of his life, and he follows it without question. In the chapel, the darkness is almost complete. The stone walls feel colder here, as though they hold memories of centuries of whispered prayers and moments of private reflection. The altar stands silent, the polished wood absorbing what little light remains in the room. The air smells faintly of old incense, a thin, lingering trace of rituals performed earlier in the day. In this quiet, the castle feels timeless, as though the hours themselves are resting. In the stables, the animals settle fully into sleep. The horses lower their heads, their bodies rising and falling slowly with each breath. Occasionally, a hoof scrapes softly against the wooden floor as one shifts to a more comfortable position. The stable boys are curled in blankets nearby, their faces partly hidden, their small bodies tucked close to the animals whose presence offers warmth. The scent of hay and earth fills the space, thicker at night when the air cools and stills. The outer gates stand closed and unmoving. The heavy wood, reinforced with iron, appears almost fused with the surrounding stone in the darkness. A faint breeze slips through the cracks between the boards, carrying with it the scent of distant soil and the quiet murmur of the night landscape. Far beyond the walls, an owl calls once, its voice echoing through the open air before fading into silence. The guards hear it faintly but give it no thought. The owl is part of the night, just as the torches are part of the walls. As the hours move closer to dawn, the atmosphere shifts again, though only slightly. The darkness does not lift, but it loosens, just enough to suggest that night is preparing to give way. The castle feels this change even before the people within it do. The stones, cold and enduring, seem to release a final deep chill, the kind that signals the end of the night's slow, deliberate hold. The air grows stiller, quieter, as though pausing to allow the morning to gather itself. Nothing in the castle rushes. Nothing announces the coming day with abrupt movement. Instead, the world waits, gently and without expectation, for the first muted signs of morning to appear at the horizon. The castle remains as it has always been, patient, steady, content in the slow rhythm that defines its existence through every hour, every season, every generation. As the last stretch of night lingers over the castle, the world remains wrapped in the same deep stillness that has defined the hours before dawn for as long as anyone can remember. The torches along the corridors burn low, their flames drawing thin, wavering lines of light that barely touch the nearby stone. Every sound feels softened, as though the very air is reluctant to disturb the quiet. A bucket somewhere in the lower hall settles with a soft thump. The wind brushes faintly along the outer tower. A guard shifts his weight, and the wooden walkway beneath him gives a single, muted creak. These small sounds pass like drifting thoughts, present only for an instant before dissolving into the vast silence around them. In the servants' quarters, the bodies lying on straw beds remain deep in sleep. Their breathing rises and falls in a quiet rhythm, steady and unified. Blankets, worn and patched many times, cling to them as the cold presses through the walls. A faint murmur escapes from someone lost in a half-formed dream, but no one wakes. The darkness is comforting here, familiar in its completeness, holding them gently until the earliest hints of morning begin to stir. In the great hall, the embers give off a final weak glow, just enough to outline the shape of the hearth and the first few inches of the stone floor. The heavy beams overhead disappear into darkness. No movement stirs the room. The benches and tables rest exactly as they were left, as though they, too, have surrendered to the night. The air carries the faded memory of yesterday's fire, a thin trace of warmth lost within the vastness of the hall. The guard on the eastern wall pauses and looks toward the horizon. The darkness there appears slightly softer, though the change is almost impossible to see directly. He feels it more than observes it, a subtle loosening in the cold air, the sense that night is no longer growing but slowly letting go. He adjusts his cloak and continues walking, each step slow and measured, the stones beneath him familiar, the path unchanged since the day he first took this watch. Inside the keep, the lady rests peacefully, wrapped in layers of wool beneath the heavy curtains of her bed. The quiet around her is deep, shaped by the thickness of the walls and the absence of any disturbance beyond the faint hum of the castle settling into itself. In the Lord's chamber, sleep remains light, but steady. He lies with one arm draped across the blanket, breathing calmly, aware in some distant part of his mind that morning is approaching but not yet willing to break from rest. Every part of the castle waits in this suspended moment, not anticipating the dawn, but simply existing within the quiet before it. The night is nearly over, but it leaves without drama, without flourish, as quietly as it arrived. Little by little, the horizon begins to pale. It is not a beam of light, not a color, not even a glow, only a thinning of darkness, so subtle that it seems less like dawn and more like the night simply forgetting to retain its depth. The castle accepts this change in the same way it accepts everything, slowly, silently, with a patience carved into its structure by countless mornings before. In the courtyard, the first hints of gray touch the stones. The shapes of barrels, troughs, and wooden beams emerge gently from shadow, not as new objects, but as old ones returning from their nightly obscurity. A rooster shifts on its perch, though it does not yet crow. The horses in the stable breathe more noticeably, adjusting to the faint difference in the air. These are quiet movements, almost hesitant, but they mark the first signs of the day beginning again. One of the servants stirs earliest, opening her eyes to the faintest trace of morning. She remains still for a moment, gathering her thoughts in the dimness, then rises slowly to begin her work. Her motions are quiet and familiar. She folds her blanket, smooths the straw beneath her bed, and ties her shawl around her shoulders before stepping softly into the corridor. The cold greets her immediately, but she knows it well. The castle always meets the morning this way, cool, reserved, steady. In the kitchen, the cook arrives and kneels before the hearth, brushing aside last night's ash to reveal the sleeping embers beneath. She breathes gently onto them, coaxing the first fragile sparks back to life. The fire awakens reluctantly, then gradually accepts the new day, spreading its orange glow across the rough stones. The smell of smoke settles into the air, warm and familiar, carrying with it the promise of the routines that will fill the hours ahead. The guard on the eastern wall watches the sky shift once more. This time, the change is clearer. A faint line of pale silver appears above the distant hills, stretching slowly outward like a thread being drawn across the horizon. He nods to himself, not with excitement, but with acceptance. Another night has passed safely. Another day begins. The cycle repeats, as it always has and likely always will. The castle, now touched by the earliest breath of morning, does not awaken all at once. It expands gradually into the new day, room by room, corridor by corridor, each part resuming its quiet role in the long, unbroken continuity of its existence. Nothing dramatic marks the transition. No bells ring, no trumpets sound. The change from night to morning is a gentle shift, a soft turning of the world that the castle recognizes instinctively. And so the life inside these walls continues, steady, unhurried, patient. A rhythm shaped not by grand events, but by the simple repetition of days, each one unfolding like the last, each one quietly stitching itself into the long fabric of a medieval existence where routine is the anchor, silence is the companion, and time moves with the deliberate calm of stone.